Welcome to the Writers Room for Run Radio. I'm Trina Wilcox. My guest today, Mark Anthony Powers. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I was reading through what your books are about, and then as I was reading, I'm like, boy, that's a lot of research that you're going to have to do. And then I found out why you have the experience. So tell me a little bit about your change in profession and why you know so much about what you write about.
Well, I worked for almost 40 years doing pulmonary and critical care. And so my protagonist specializes in those areas. And so I've lived through a lot of what I write. I write fiction, but I have experienced a lot of similar situations. And I think there are a lot of great writers that write medical thrillers. I don't know, most of them probably haven't lived through a lot of what they're writing about. They've done good research, but I think it helps to sometimes to have lived through it.
So how long into your career did you always have in the back of your mind that you might write, or have you always written, just not necessarily the novels based on from what you learned in your career?
My career kept me so busy that I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. As I was winding my career down, I was able to stop taking night and weekend call for the last couple of years. And so during those times, I would start to think about, I've had a lot of experiences. I should start writing some of these things down. I did take a year of creative writing when I was in college and look back on what I wrote, and wow, it was pretty raw stuff. But I decided to take some more classes in writing when I retired. And so I immediately took one class after another then the first one was on writing novels. And so I went ahead and wrote my first novel as part of that, and then took more classes and started thinking of other ideas for continuing the epic that I have written, which is now 4 books in a series. And they're the same protagonist, the same characters. It spans about 50 years, and hopefully gives a good picture of the medical life of my generation.
Had you already done a lot of technical writing?
Not a lot. I did a lot more clinical work, and a lot of my colleagues were writing more academic papers. I wrote several that were published, but I can't say it was anything that I concentrated on. I was so busy taking care of sick people that I didn't think a lot about that. I was mostly also trying to keep up with the medical literature, which is a major effort in itself.
So what surprised you most when you started taking writing classes?
Well, learning the craft. It's a real craft to try to write a novel that will keep a reader turning the pages. You can put down a lot of stuff, but if it doesn't catch the reader's attention at the beginning and flow in a way that they're happy with, it keeps them engaged. You have to constantly be raising the stakes as you write, as the novel goes on, to try to keep them wanting to find out what happens. Right. So I think trying to learn to write a good story is important, and that's what I try to do with all my books. I've also incorporated themes into each of them that are hopefully messages that they'll take from my books, in addition to enjoying a good story.
What has changed, if anything, in your writing process from when you started even having the idea that you would start writing and then you took some classes? Did you have a certain system that kind of changed as you learned more, or have you just kind of pretty much stuck to a system?
That's a good question. I think it's been a real gradual evolution. I've always liked to get up in the morning and just get my brain started, reading the paper and working a few puzzles or something like that. And then sitting down for a couple hours and just with the keyboard and just trying to get something down on paper. I think probably the biggest and most helpful change occurred when I found 5 other novelists and they're all very good writers, and we meet regularly. I've been meeting with them for 5 years now, and we're unmerciful with each other, and we learn to develop thick skins. And I don't think you can improve your work unless you have honest feedback. And that's been incredibly helpful, is to have those people. And I'm meeting with them tomorrow again. We're working on my fourth novel now. We're about 2/3 of the way through workshopping that. And I mean, they look at every word, every line. And so it's been incredibly helpful. I don't think I could have completed the books without their encouragement and feedback.
So committing to a trilogy is a pretty serious commitment. So did you know from the beginning that you were going to have more than one book in a series?
No,
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 no.
it's actually 4 books now.
Mhm.
And that'll complete the series of 4 books.
Okay.
No, I wrote the first novel, and I read it through afterwards, and I wasn't really happy with it. Somebody suggested, one of my teachers suggested I just put it in the drawer and let it sit there for a while.
Really?
And then I had an idea for the second book, which was actually my debut novel. And it just flowed. I mean, it almost wrote itself. That's the one, A Swarm in May. And there was a lot going on at that time regarding racism in America, and created a character. My protagonist is white, but in that book, he had to learn about racism from a Black intern that he was supposed to be teaching. So it was his learning process, and what he learned going through the escalating threats that the Black intern faced in the story. That book just wrote itself, and it was actually, I wrote the first drafts before George Floyd was murdered in the U.S. and the Black Lives Matter really took off here in America. You're in Scotland, right?
No, I'm in US.
Oh, you are? Okay. I don't know
Yeah.
why I thought Glasgow somewhere on something, and I was thinking
Mm-mm.
you were overseas. Okay, sorry.
Nope.
And then the third book, I got the idea for that before the 2020 presidential election here, and I have been very concerned about climate change, especially since I now have grandsons, and I like them to have a wonderful world to grow up in, and was watching all that was going on with the elections, and was terrified at how they might come out. And so I wrote the book as though they came out one way, and it takes a look at climate change and political polarization. And again, that story kind of wrote itself. Again, it's from the same protagonist's viewpoint. And so he's seeing patients with problems that are caused by climate change. And he's also living the climate change. It's set in 2024, so things are even hotter than they are today. So that was the third book. I should go back and mention what the first book was, because I published it between the second and the third. I'd rewritten it, I don't know how many times. I'd had, professional editing. I'd cut 50 pages out of it. And finally, my editor said she thought it was ready to publish, and so I did. And that's Breath and Mercy. And it's our protagonist, Phineas Mann, early in his career, starting in medical school, when he's facing the ethical dilemmas that physicians face when they're caring for dying patients. And so that was something that, weighed on me towards the end of my career. And I said it in a time before we had the help of palliative care services, and it was a pretty undeveloped area where the physician who was actually at the bedside with the patient was making a lot of those decisions, while they're also making decisions about their kidneys and hearts and lungs. So it's written in that time from that perspective. And it took me a while to get where I felt like that one was ready to publish. So it was my second publication. And then the third one was the one about climate. It was called Nature's Bite. And it looks at how even the most powerful people in the world are subject to nature's whims if they don't pay attention to them. Now, the fourth book, if you want,
Yes,
as long as I'm
please.
on a streak right now, is our main character, Phineas, is at a late stage of severe Parkinson's disease. His mind is still working, but he's experiencing the biases that people generate when they see him, and they
Mhm.
think that he's doesn't have any worth left, and but his mind is working fine, and he's got 50 years of pulmonary and critical care expertise in his brain, and so he's called upon to help, and he has to help some people very close to him, despite everybody's biases about him. So that's the first one. The final one looks at biases, specifically ageism and some
Mhm.
other biases, and that's the final volume of the series.
It seems like you pretty much know a lot about your subjects before you even write about them. But what do you do when you do hit something that you're not an expert in? How's that research look for you? What's that look like? Do you interview people? Are you on the web? Both, everything.
All of that. Plus,
Yeah.
I reach out to beta readers.
Okay.
One of the beta readers for my last novel is a specialist at Duke University in Parkinson's disease, and she also runs a narrative writing class at Duke. I started enjoying her seminars on narrative writing for physicians. And then when I learned she was a Parkinson's disease specialist, I said, hey, I'm writing a book where the character has that. I said, would you be a beta reader? And she said she'd love to. And so she read the book and gave me some very honest and helpful feedback on it. I have other beta readers. Phineas in his state of having the bad Parkinson's disease also has a service dog. I reached out to some people I know who raise service dogs and are intimately involved with their program to place the dogs with patients. And he read my novel as a beta reader, and he gave me feedback on that. And so, plus I get, the breadth of knowledge among the people that are in my novelist group is also helpful, and they will often send me references that they come across. And so I think it would be very hard to write in isolation. And I have to admire the classic authors back in the 1800s and 1900s who wrote timeless fiction all by themselves with a pen and ink.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think that they could come up with such gems of literature. So
I like that you have the group. I think that's probably something a lot of people listening could, create, is a group of that support and bounce ideas off of each other if they're not already doing that.
yeah, it's been essential. I doubt I'd have published one book if I hadn't been part of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if where you live they have something called OLLI, OLLI, Osher Lifetime Learning Institute. It's across the whole country. I'm not sure it's outside of the US, but it might be. But Duke, which is where I retired from, has one of the flagship campuses for Osher Lifetime Learning Institute. And there were lots of writing classes as part of that. That's where I took them. And one of the people in one of the classes said, hey, I'm writing a novel. She put a word out on the OLLI website. I'm looking for other people who are writing novels. And our group formed and evolved. So some people left, and now the group that we have right now are all very good writers with incredibly good feedback. So I'm very lucky.
Let's talk about your publishing process. So you've got this group of writers. Did you know from the get-go that you would self-publish? Did you entertain the idea of sending off manuscripts to publishers, hybrid?
Yeah, I did. I took a class on self-publishing as part of the OLLI program, and the guy that ran it had self-published a whole series of novels. He'd retired from a teaching career and technical part at Duke, but he was writing fantasy novels on the side, and so self-publishing them. And when I took his class, he in the first classes gave us a picture of what it's like to try to get published with the traditional big publishing houses. told us what the long odds were of finding a literary agent. And the odds he gave us, I'm actually seeing even longer odds when I read things now. Literary agents are obviously swamped with submissions and have to be very quick with their decisions, and certain, you have to grab them right away. And one of the things I also learned is that if you're beyond a certain age, the agent may be less excited about taking you on because they want somebody that they can work with for a very long career. So when it's your second career, that's going to probably be something against you. When I got A Swarm in May, the second novel, which was my debut novel, where I thought the editor thought it was ready to publish, and I hire a professional editor.
Okay.
One of the things I learned in the class is don't publish something that's not edited by somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I hired a professional editor, somebody who teaches writing at the college level and has published multiple novels and nonfiction books.
Mm-hmm.
And she also will do consulting editor's work. And so she sat down with me after we'd gone through the edits, and she said, okay, now let me help you write a query letter so you can get an agent. And I had thought, wow, the message from A Swarm in May is so urgent. That's the whole racism in America picture was so urgent. I didn't want to wait 5 or 10 years to have my book come out.
Yeah.
And so I said, I think I might explore self-publishing. And she looked at me like I had, two heads, and said, are you sure you really want to do this? And I said, I think so. Let me start exploring it. And so I got out my notes from the class, and I realized, wow, you really got to know what you're doing technically to do this. And I emailed my former teacher for that class, and I said, would you mind being a consultant for me? And I'll pay you as a consultant to help me do this. And he said, let me give you a name. I'm too busy. The pandemic is going on, and I've got family I've got to care for. I'll give you a name. And he gave me a name, and she is the one that did the covers and did all the technical part of putting the books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Ingram Spark and all the platforms, and was a great help, and gave me the name of somebody who helped me figure out marketing, promotion. And she gave me the name of somebody who would help me do a good website.
Excellent.
So it was just a whole series of one person referring me to another person to another. And then we got the book ready to go. And
that's very, very cool. Very exciting. It seems like you couldn't have, if this would have been your first career, your writing style would have looked different. However, do you wish this would have been your first and only career, or are you very grateful for the first one?
Well, having the first one behind me has allowed me to write what I've been writing.
Right.
And it's given me material and ideas. I think I don't think I was ready for this to be my first career.
Yeah.
If I tried to do this coming out of college or even a graduate school, maybe if I'd gone and did an MFA or something like that, I'd have had more preparation. But where I was when I entered the medical profession, I wouldn't have been ready to write, maybe play with some short stories, but certainly not tackle a novel. Yeah. And then medical career, particularly specialties I was in, just completely consumes you. Mm-hmm. I did some other things while I was doing it, but those were just more for sanity. I took art classes, drawing and sculpting, and I coached Little League baseball, and I did things like that just for sanity and for my sons. But I never would have been able to take 2 or 3 hours a day to sit down and write. Since
healthcare is part of your world, what is a fitness routine and taking care of your mental and physical health? What's that look like for your day to day?
I do try to exercise almost every day.
Yeah.
If I can. Fortunately, I've been very fortunate. My wife is healthy and she likes to exercise also. And I used to run a lot. She convinced me that she wanted me to be able to walk as we got old. And so we started cycling instead to try to preserve my knees.
Yeah.
And I enjoy swimming. When I was 50, I took on the goal of doing a triathlon and just to see if I could do it. It wasn't one of the Ironmans, it was a shorter one.
Yeah.
But I've always liked to swim. And so I did that. And then I found out, I really like this kind of training. And so it's come down now to cycling and swimming. And we hike a lot. We live across the street from a forest that's over 5,000 acres.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Full of trails. And she and I have volunteered as stewards to help maintain the trails. And so we hike a lot in that area. We're very fortunate to have found a home near that.
That's very exciting. All right. So what's next for you?
What's next? Well, I've got to publish this fourth book.
Yes.
It's right now I'm past 60,000 words on it. My other books are 75 to 85,000. I'd like to, when I write a book, I write what's called a skeleton draft, which creates the story arc for me. And then I like to go back over it and over and over and add flesh to the bones. And I'd like to add a little more flesh to this one. I'm not sure I'll add a whole lot, but I don't want to add fluff. I don't want to add useless words to it. So we're about 3 or 4 months from finishing workshopping it in my novelist group. And so during that time, I'm hopefully going to get it where it's ready to send to the editor. And so then there'll be all the whole editing process after that, and then the getting it ready to publish process. That's going to take a lot of 2023, I think, to get that ready. I'm thinking, and this is my wife's suggestion, is I start writing short stories unless I come up with a knockout idea for another novel, and try to get the short stories in magazines to let people know who I am, and maybe they'll want to read my novels.
For sure.
So I want to learn the craft of writing short stories. I've just read a wonderful book by George Saunders called A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, which is a workshop. He teaches writing short stories and writing fiction in general at Syracuse University. He's a master author, wrote Lincoln in the Bardo and a bunch of other great novels. And I just finished reading that, and I think, I'm going to start trying to study that craft and see if I can take that on as a new project. Got a couple ideas for the short stories and one for a novel, but it's very unformed right now.
Sounds like you've got a lot to think about and produce. In the meantime, where can people go to catch up on the reading from you?
Great. It'd be great if people could read my first 3 books before the 4th one comes out.
Right.
There are 3 URLs that will take people to my books. MarkAnthonyPowers.com is the easiest one, if they remember that. My publishing house is called Hawksbill Press. Hawksbill is the endangered sea turtle. So Hawksbill Press, all lowercase all together, .com will take them there. And my debut novel, A Swarm in May.com, all lowercase again, will also take them to my website, which will give them links to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, which is Ingram Spark connection. And you can read endorsements from the people who've written endorsements for the publications. There are links to those on there, and there are blurbs about each story, each book, as well as a short bio for me.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark Anthony Powers. Come back anytime.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks.